If your router is out of the box new, it probably needs to be updated. So to demonstrate how to update here, I first of all have to downgrade my router because it's already been updated. So to go get the files, you need to do a downgrade. You click on System, go down here on Resources. And you notice here at the bottom it says Architecture MIPSBE. So that's what we look for the download files. Look under MIPSBE for this particular router. As we have mentioned in earlier videos, to get your upgrade package, you would go here if you want to manually upgrade your router. But in this case, I want to do a download archive. I want to find an older version, which you can't do with the upgrade concept. So I'm going to do release 647.10. If you remember, I said I need the MIPSBE version. So I click on that. And I'm going to save the file. That's the file name. Now that we've downloaded the downgrade file, I'm going to start up my Windows Explorer. I'm going to just close this thing out. I'm going to go to my Files directory. Bring Explorer back on view here. I'm going to drag and drop this thing any place here in the Files area. And if you watch it, it's set there and it'll move that file over to your Files directory. It's going to take a little bit, so I'll pause. Now that the file has been copied over here into our Files directory of our router, we simply close that out. We don't need the download file option. We come back to our system, we do packages, and we do downgrade. It's going to warn you to do the downgrade. It has to do a reboot. If you say yes, it's going to reboot the computer. It's going to go read the downgraded software version, install it, and then bring the router back up. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, the router is rebooted with the new downgrade software installed, and we're waiting for it to come fully up so we can reconnect. Notice the auto reconnect is still attempting to reestablish connection. Once the router is ready, then it will go ahead and attempt to connect, and it should connect because all the parameters are here. Okay, now it reconnected once again, and notice now the version is 647.10. So we think we actually did a downgrade, but there's one part missing yet. If you go back over here and you look at your router board, that's the actual firmware on the computer board of the router. Notice that it also downgraded to 4710. So everything's been upgraded. Now let's go through what you would normally do is that you want to update your system packages to bring them current. So we're going to check for updates. Sure enough, there's a new update. So we're going to download and install the update of the OS 7. A lot of people get confused. They talk about firmware and they say this is firmware. Well, you know, really it's firmware, but it's the operating system firmware. Then there's the other firmware, which is the board firmware, the router board firmware. So there's really two different types of firmware here. Right now we're upgrading the operating system firmware. Okay, now you notice our operating firmware has been updated to 649.2. So we're going to say OK. Let's go look and see what happened with our router board firmware. Notice it was updated too, so the system automatically updated both of them for you when you did your upgrade. So now your operating system is current, your firmware on the router board is current, and you're ready to do more important things with your router. Notice the router board firmware and the package list firmwares are 47. These two script files are going to execute, and we'll put the horse before the cart and tell you how it all happened after it happens. So here it is in progress. Notice here at this point the packages have been updated and the router board has been updated, but it's got a problem. So you have to reboot for the for the updates to take effect. So that's the purpose of the second script. It's going to provide the reboot it needs to fix this, and you'll see that shortly. And now the second script has executed, which simply reboots the router to clear up that problem we have with the router board. And shortly you'll see the results of that reboot. And here we can see that the router board is now happy. There's no more message saying that it needs to be rebooted. And both systems have been updated to the current 6.49.2. Let's take a look at the Schedule 1 item, which is a script file. And you see it starts on that date. It also has a start time. You'd normally want to make the start time like 4 o'clock in the morning when it wouldn't bother anybody. It shouldn't be in use at that time. And the interval I've set for 5 days. You can make it any interval you want to. Next, we're going to look at schedule number 2, which is what reboots the router 2 minutes after the previous schedule. And what this does for us, it allows the update to the router board to occur. For some reason, it doesn't work using scripts like it does doing the upgrade. If you notice the upgrade I did earlier, it updated the router board automatically. There was no requirement to reboot. But when you do the script version, there's something missing. And I haven't found it yet. So I have to run a second script to reboot to clear the errors on the router board. Let's talk about script files for a second. If we go over here and we open up our system and look at our scheduler, we can schedule script files here. So what does that mean? Well, a script file is something that allows you to make an event take place at a certain time. So we've added a new script here. It's under schedule number 3. And the start date, you can set the start date whenever you want it. You can set the start time whenever you want it. Of course, the start time would usually be like 4 o'clock in the morning when you don't bother anybody that's trying to use the router. And then the interval, you can put number D for the number of days, which I do at least 5 or 7 days. I do a security check if you want to use a script to check for security. But then you got to decide the policies. Like I don't want FTP to be used. I don't want passwords to be changed. I don't want sensitivity. I don't want this dude thing or this Roman to be allowed in a sniff. All I want is to be able to read, write, test, keep the policies open, and then reboot. So once I've decided on those things, then now I got to come down here and tell it what I want the script to do. So in this particular case, I just want the script to reboot the system. And that's all there is to it. Then we apply these items. And now on that date, the first event will start. And every time it runs, it'll increase the count. So we applied already. So we notice now we have a schedule 3 that tells you the interval right now is, I don't have an interval. I forgot to add it. The owner, that's the person that created it, and the run count is 0. The next run, it doesn't have a time, so it doesn't know when to do the next run. It's going to do a system reboot. So it's that simple to set up a script here in Mikrotik. So I'm going to remove that script because it has no purpose. So this lesson has covered how to do manual system upgrades to your router. It's covered how to do manual downgrades to your router operating software. And it's also shown how to do automatic updates to keep your router current with the latest changes and patches. So our next video will delve into the security aspect of the router.